the woman deliberately threw the dog from a high altitude. Everyone was shocked. The next second, the dog successfully opened the parachute. Seeing this scene, the audience began to applaud and cheer. But the two people who finished the performance did not intend to come down. They wanted to use the hot air balloon to break the highest record of human ascent. Little did they know that this choice almost cost them their lives. As the hot air balloon began to accelerate and rise through the clouds, they had reached an altitude of 23,000 feet. At this time, the air began to become thinner. The frost on the hot air balloon became thicker. The temperature also dropped to minus 15 degrees. The man quickly recorded the data and wanted to use a pigeon to send a message to the ground. The pigeon was frozen to death. At this time, the woman realized that something was wrong. She wanted to pull down the deflation valve to let the hot air the balloon descended. However, the valve was frozen. The man next to her was seriously short of oxygen. The woman could only climb up and deflate the balloon manually. She climbed up carefully along the rope. Finally, she reached the edge of the balloon. However, she found that the rope was frozen to the surface of the balloon. At this time, she could only grab the rope next to her. The distance was a bit far. She wanted to release her left hand to grab the rope. However, she didn't catch it. Fortunately, her calf was holding the rope. The woman stretched out her hand with all her strength and successfully grabbed the rope. She quickly tied the rope to her body. Then she started climbing again. Finally, she reached the top of the balloon, so she slowly stood up. With the man kicked the valve with all his strength and finally succeeded in opening it. Then the woman took out a dagger and cut the shoelaces to make the shoe stuck to the valve to prevent it from freezing again. The hot air balloon began to descend. The woman suddenly found something wrong. The hot air balloon was falling rapidly. In order to slow down the descent, the man decided to abandon the hanging basket. So he took out a knife and climbed up the ring to cut the rope used for fixing. The hanging basket successfully fell off, but their descent speed was still very fast. At this time, the woman planned to sacrifice herself to reduce the weight, but was stopped by the man. He asked the woman to hold the rope tightly, and then directly cut the rope that bound the hot air balloon. The hot air balloon quickly shrank into a parachute, finally slowed down the speed. But the crisis was not resolved. The parachute flew towards the woods. The man fell from a high altitude. The woman's feet were entangled in the rope. As a result, she was dragged for several thousand meters. It was not until the hot air balloon completely lost power that it stopped. When the woman woke up from her coma, she shouted the man's name anxiously. Fortunately, the man was still alive. The two supported each other and stood up. Soon the whole world knew about their experience. The meteorological data they recorded also provided a reference for the later weather forecast. And this story is also adapted from real events. Do you know who they are?